Hello, my name is Selena Marlowe, and I never thought the deepest wounds I'd carry would come from inside my own home. My brother broke both my arms, and instead of protecting me, my parents begged me to stay quiet. I wore the uniform of the United States Navy, yet in my family's kitchen I was treated like I didn't matter. This is not just my story, it's the story of anyone who has ever been silenced when they needed help most. Stay with me because what happened next proves that truth can stand firm when silence cannot. The August heat clung to my uniform blouse as I stood on my parents' porch. Inside, laughter rose like I'd arrived late to someone else's story. I remembered Dad's retirement dinner last year, Trent at the center, me forgotten at the edge. Today felt no different. Judith opened the door, quick smile fixed in place, her gaze darting past me toward the driveway as if someone more important might arrive. The living room hummed with small-town admiration. Warren ushered me inside but steered me past the cluster of neighbors straight to the dining table. A chair had been set at the far corner. When I moved to sit near the middle, Judith swooped in, chirping about making space for Trent's guest, his so-called training partner. She slid my chair toward the wall with a practiced motion. The scrape on the hardwood was louder than her apology. Dinner unfolded in stages of erasure. Warren held up laminated clippings of Trent's old MMA fights, recounting stats like they were scripture. My deployments, Bahrain, Guam, were brushed aside with a quick nod, the kind reserved for small talk. The table clapped politely for my brother's every anecdote while my words sank like stones in shallow water. I kept still, fork balanced, until a buzz stirred the air. Trent's phone lit up beside his plate. He leaned forward too fast, blocking my line of sight, but not fast enough. One line pulsed before he dimmed the screen. "Don't forget to swap the PDF signature before Friday." His jaw tightened when he caught me looking. I lowered my eyes to my plate, letting silence hold the weight. The meal dragged on. Judith filled gaps with stories of Trent's passion, how discipline was never his strength, but spirit carried him through. I listened back straight, remembering nights on base where discipline meant lives saved. As dessert cleared, Trent leaned back, smirking. "Still obsessing over rules, Navy girl." The nickname, sharp with disdain, drew laughter from Judith. "Not everything's about rules, dear." My hands tightened beneath the tablecloth. I imagined the cracks in the house, widening beams, groaning under the pressure of denial. I stood when dishes were gathered, smoothing my blouse as though composure were another uniform to wear. Stepping toward the porch, the air shifted lighter outside, yet heavy with words unspoken. Warren followed, voice low, gravel catching at the edges. "Don't start trouble, Selena. This house has no room for storms." Monday morning light cut sharp across the kitchen tile. Syrup sizzled on the pan as I flipped pancakes, reaching for an old childhood memory. Dad's words last night. No room for storms. I wondered how much longer I'd stay quiet. The pan hissed when a drop slid to the burner and died. I stacked pancakes and told myself breakfast could be a truce. Footsteps pounded the hall. Trent swung into the doorway, eyes rimmed red, phone in hand. "You making jokes about my diet now?" He rapped the counter. "Is that your Navy humor?" "It's breakfast," I said. "Sit. Eat while it's hot." He tilted a plate, watching syrup creep to the rim. "You always think you're better than us." He flipped the plate. Porcelain shattered. Syrup splashed my sleeve and streaked under the fridge. I stepped back. He stepped forward. "Don't walk away from me." "Trent, enough." I kept my voice level. He clamped my wrist and yanked. Pain bit, then a heavy crack. My shoulder struck the dresser. Paint chipped in a white star. He squeezed harder. Finger-shaped bruises rose across my skin. I wrenched free, stumbling into broken porcelain. A shard slid under my palm. Another buried in the wooden toe kick. Syrup pooled, catching light. I braced with my other hand and heat flared up the forearm. Judith burst in. "What happened?" "What did you do?" The word tore. Trent's face drained into innocence. "She fell," he said. "She's clumsy." Judith wavered, then chose. "Say you fell," she whispered. "Please, Selena, Don't make this worse. The kitchen resolved into edges, the burn of the pan sugar grit under my shoes, the fork still in my fist. No, I said. I won't. Warren's truck door slammed. The ride in was a tunnel of silence. I cradled my arm. At the Navy ER fluorescent light blanched the air. A corpsman took vitals, bagged the shard, logged the time. The plastic band on my wrist felt heavier than rank. LCDR Fiona Kessler entered with a calm that made space. She washed her hands, examined the swelling. Where does it hurt most? Here. And here. She ordered films. While we waited, she photographed my arm, the syrup-stained sleeve. We document everything she said. Chain of custody begins now. X-rays returned, like weather maps, white fractures across gray. Kessler pressed the images to the light box. Your injuries are consistent with blunt force trauma. Judith sat rigid. She slipped, she said. Kessler looked from her to me. Do you want to make a report? I saw last night's table, my chair at the edge, the message on Trent's phone. Don't forget to swap the PDF signature before Friday. I nodded. Kessler's tone shifted from gentle to steel. She called security, requested evidence bags, directed the corpsman to log times and locations, tagged my clothing. Your injuries are consistent with blunt force trauma. I will not let this vanish. She set a form on a clipboard and handed me a pen. The lines were simple: name, time, incident, perpetrator. My fingers shook, but the letters held. My pen felt heavier than bone. The room held its air. As I sign, Warren's voicemail pings on my phone. Don't put his name in writing, Selena. Don't. At that moment, base security issues a temporary no-contact order against Trent. The brace on my wrist made each keystroke stiff, but every document I opened was another brick pried loose from the wall Trent thought would protect him. Kessler's voice echoed, I will not let this vanish. I carried it into the county records building, a quiet cube of hum and fluorescent doubt. Detective Marcus Ellery met me with coffee. We start simple, he said. Match the grant to the ledger, then read the metadata. I flexed my fingers in the brace. Pain fuzzed the edges, but the screen sharpened my focus. We paged through minutes, budgets, attachments. Trent's youth program proposal surfaced again. Polished promise, thin accountability. When we pulled the signed PDF, a shimmer crawled my skin. The signature looked right until it didn't, a faint halo, a blur, where ink should anchor. Marcus leaned closer. Zoom to 800. At that magnification, the curve of the P broke into pixels, unlike the clerk's native sign. He jotted the archive ID, then opened properties. Created 2 months ago, modified last Friday at 11:54 p.m. Odd hour for a clerk, he murmured. Normal hour for a desperate editor. Back at my temporary housing office, I propped my wrist on a rolled towel and opened a notebook. I listed times, ER intake, photo capture, security call, artifact IDs, the grant's path. A wall brick by brick, but this one could hold. At the front desk, an envelope weighted, cream stock, cheap authority. Legal notice, bold. Inside, a cease and desist full of threats, but no docket, no stamp, a law firm that vanished under a search. Marcus scanned it and slid it back. Intimidation. Log it. Move on. On my way home, my phone buzzed. He hurt me too. Thank you for speaking. Another ping, I can't sign my name. J. I stood in the hallway, the soda machine loud as surf. Something in me hushed around the message, a space the size of someone else's fear. That evening, Dana Holt, the JAG advisor, appeared on video. Forward the PDFs, she said. We'll pull the edit trail. While the files uploaded, I told her about Jay. Document it, she said. Anonymous is still evidence. The metadata opened like a weather map, timestamps, creator fields, software versions, the weather of a lie. Holt traced the chain. Created on a home machine, then edited with a cheap signature tool. The IP geolocates to your parents' street. My throat tightened. Trent's laptop. Likely, she said. We'll confirm once we subpoena endpoint logs. I wrote it down times hashes a task list that smelled like hope. The ache in my wrist ebbed under the rhythm of work. In the margin, I printed, "What if this is bigger than the kitchen?" Near dusk, Marcus called. One more pass. Check board minutes the week before submission. We did. There it was, a motion introduced by Warren to waive site visits for programs with long-standing community trust. The vote carried. My father's signature looked steady. My breath didn't. Holt looked at me directly on the next call. "This isn't just assault. It's fraud. We can tie him and your parents to this." The words settled like a keel on water. I printed the grant packet and slid it into a clear binder. I filed Jay's texts behind a blank page. The envelope marked "legal notice" went into an evidence folder. I wrote the log along the spine. The sun dropped behind the pines. Night slid over the lot. When fatigue broke through, I stood by the window. A door slammed. A dog barked. I pictured the wall Trent trusted built of favors and silence and saw gaps widening. I wasn't swinging a hammer. I was asking the wall to tell the truth, and it was. That night, a rock shatters the window of my Navy housing unit. A note tied to it. "Stop digging. Every wall hides cracks sometimes. All it takes is one steady hand to bring it down." If you've followed me this far, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of what happens when silence finally shatters. The chamber smelled of polished oak and old paper. I sat in my dress white's arms, bound in braces, every step echoing louder than words. I remembered the note tied to the shattered glass, "Stop digging." Today I would prove digging was exactly what saved me. The gallery filled with neighbors' church hats and ball caps, folded programs held like shields. At the front, an empty chair marked with Trent Marlowe stood beside the dais, his absence a presence. Benches held neighbors I'd known since grade school, their whispers sifted like sand through quiet hall. The clerk called the matter. I sat straight. Breathe in a count, breathe out a count, the way the ship taught me. Judith's lipstick was too bright for the room. Warren's jaw worked against silence. The chair nodded to our first witness. LCDR Fiona Kessler rose. She did not dramatize. She recited intake time photos before treatment custody logs. The screen showed my forearm enlarged, bruises in the exact pattern of a hand, a ceramic shard bagged and tagged, a sleeve dark with syrup sealed against contamination. Gasps moved through the rows. Kessler concluded that the injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma and that procedures were followed without exception. Detective Marcus Ellery took the podium next. He introduced the grant file application attachment, signed PDF. At normal zoom, the signature looked like ink. At 800%, it broke into pixels. He explained the halo from a cheap overlay and the mismatch with the clerk's real sign. Dana Holt JAG followed with metadata timestamps, software versions, hash values, and a late-night edit from a home IP on my parents' street, minutes before a supporting letter appeared. A murmur rippled, "Fraud, not accident." The chair called Comptroller Vivian Park. She brought a gray binder and a sealed pouch from a drawer in the dais. Keys clinked, a tear strip released. Under the document camera, a ledger page came, sharp: program sponsorships, cosigners, risk waivers. Two names sat beside Trent's line, the same careful cursive as my childhood permission slips: Judith Marlowe, Warren Marlowe. Park read a notation in a flat tone: oversight, waived on the strength of long-standing community trust. A hush settled over the chamber. Judith dabbed at her eye. Warren studied the beams as if timber could change the record. I stood before I planned to, braces tugging at fabric, and faced the microphone. The kitchen tile flashed in my mind. The rock that broke my window. The text from a kid too afraid to sign a name. I thought of Kessler's calm, Ellery's patience, Holt's straight line from data to deed. I let the quiet hold me, then gave it the words it demanded. My family told me silence was loyalty. It wasn't. Silence was complicity. Chairs creaked. Someone exhaled a prayer. A counselor said the evidence troubled him deeply. Another asked Park how often waivers were issued. Rare, she answered, and never without robust verification. The word rang. Judith whispered they only meant to help the town. Warren's knuckles whitened on the table. I did not answer. Intention is not impact. The record had already spoken. The chair summarized the record medical documentation digital anomalies and a sealed ledger naming co-signers. He asked the clerk to mark each exhibit and confirm the chain. He looked along the dais, then out across the chamber as if weighing the room itself. My braces ached, a small, honest pain that kept me in my body, while the future rearranged itself one page at a time. Council chair strikes gavel. This matter is referred for criminal review. Judith's eyes flash panic. Warren bows his head. The room erupts in whispers. The Sunday bells rang across town clear and sharp, as if even the air wanted to remind me silence could no longer hold me. I thought back to that first night, Dad whispering, "Don't start trouble, Selena." Trouble had already started. Truth had only caught up. The hall beside the church smelled of lemon oil. Hymn numbers clicked while neighbors settled like witnesses. Pastor Lillian opened with a brief prayer. She called my parents forward. Judith unfolded a counsel script with trembling hands. Warren stared at the paper as if it might rearrange into mercy. Their voices came thin and careful apology by template never touching my name. I kept my shoulders square and let the words pass, noting what was said and what wasn't. Responsibility present. Remorse absent. Deputy Cole stood near the exit, a quiet boundary. When the statement ended, there was no applause, only the scrape of chairs. Outside, sun pooled on the steps. A teenage girl brushed my sleeve as she hurried past. "Because of you, I spoke," she whispered. I sat beneath the bell tower until footsteps returned. Fiona Kessler eased down beside me, a presence that makes room rather than noise. She pressed a postcard into my palm, a gray sea under a clean horizon. "Keep speaking. The system listens when you don't stop." I traced the letters. The brace pinched my skin. It meant I was still here now. Inside, Pastor Lillian announced consequences: 6 months suspension from the church board, a public correction in the bulletin, volunteer hours at the shelter. I watched my parents sign the acknowledgement, their pens moving like oars in shallow water. They did not look up. Later in the community room, I stood at a scuffed lectern and named a beginning: the Marlowe Resilience Fund, small grants for reporting, counseling, a cab ride on the worst night. I spoke about ledgers that tell the truth and hands that lift instead of press down. Pledges rose steady. I stood before the crowd. I was told silence was loyalty, but silence nearly destroyed me. Today, I choose truth, not just for me, but for everyone who has been told to stay quiet. Dawn found me at the beach where water kept its old appointment with sand. Wind tugged my hair. Gulls stitched seams across the sky. I wrote what I needed to remember and what I needed to release. The tide came forward, reading and erasing at once. A camera crew stepped off the pier. I kept my boots in my hand and the horizon in my throat. Later on the beach, I scrawl, "I did not fall in the sand." A reporter's voice interrupts: "Lieutenant Marlowe, what's your message to those still silent?" I look straight into the lens. Silence never saved me. Speaking did. I've carried scars on my body and silence in my memory, but what steadied me was realizing that truth has a strength. Silence never could. If my story has stirred something in you, I ask you to share your thoughts about me in the comments, because every word you leave becomes part of the record that silence once tried to erase. In your own life, remember this: never mistake loyalty for submission, and never confuse peace with silence. Speaking up may tremble at first, but it steadies with each echo. Support matters, and your voice could save someone's tomorrow.